Hello, good day. Sitting here taking in a number of videos about attachment styles and s sort of going around and around the same stuff I know, but I'm trying to develop a better understanding and a deeper fluency with this material. And one thing that's emerged for me today is that we talk about attachment styles. Obviously, we've got secure. People are like, hi, we can do this. Let's have healthy relationships. They're in one pool over here. Then over in the other pool, we have people who have insecure attachment styles. And I think that's the part to focus on, is that it's insecure. Because when we start saying anxious, avoidant, fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant, we get into disorganized, whatever we want to call these different blends of insecure attachment styles. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that in all cases, we're talking about anxiety. This is really lighting up for me today, and I don't necessarily hear a lot of people highlighting this fact. Um, Now, it comes up in the discussions, but let's just do a big banner version of this where we say there's secure and there's anxious. That's it. It's what happens within the anxious group, right? People who are dealing with anxious responses, right? And in some cases, the impulse is to hold on for dear life because you're afraid of losing something. But we forget that avoidant is also anxious. It's the fear of being consumed by something and obliterated by it, losing ourselves, losing our freedoms, losing a direction, drive, whatever it might be. There's a fear of losing ourselves. So it's either fear of losing the other or fear of losing self. And in both cases, it's fear. It's an anxiety response. And for the very lucky few, there's a little bit of an alternation between the two where it's like, no, don't leave me. Fine, fucking leave me. Like we go back and forth. Um, but ultimately, it's anxiety. And so when we're talking about people with attachment styles and we're like, you're so needy, you're so cold, they're just so scared. They're just so scared. And that's not a kind way to speak about people who are dealing with fear. And it's not helpful to us to villainize people who are sadly doing the best they can with a sense of overwhelm and confusion and loss and terror. In a lot of cases, people are feeling real terror, real, like a person who has what we would call an anxious attachment style doesn't, they're terrified of losing a person and falling into grief because we experience that kind of loss as grief, the same as when somebody dies. And no amount of being rational and saying, well, they're still in the world, they're still among us, it doesn't matter, they're dead to your world. And going through that grief is exceedingly painful for anybody, regardless of their attachment style. But in the case of somebody who attaches from a more anxious position, saying, no, don't leave me, it's this fear of that happening and that pain and not knowing if we can handle it, which is something I want to get down to after after this segment. So you've got that mortal fear of losing someone and going through intense grief and not having that person you've bonded to there to help you through that. It's a double loss. It's very painful. It's not you're so needy. Oh my God, get over yourself. And when we're dealing with people who have more of an avoidant attachment style, them pushing away and doing all this crazy stuff is self-protective. They're afraid of being devoured. They're afraid of losing themselves. They're afraid also, here's another thing, not just that you're the threat, but that maybe they're the problem. And if you get close enough, you're going to find out how awful they are. And they'll finally be able to show they are unlovable. They were right all along. Once you see who they are, you're going to run for the hills. And it's going to deepen that wound around their insufficiency, too. So, this could be part of it as well. It's not just fear of being absorbed into like some other larger collective and losing our identities and our freedoms. It's also about being exposed when we get into those intimate places, being in a place where we can get hurt and then getting a blow in that most sensitive part of our being. that's something that natural self-preservation instincts are going to kick in irrationally and say like, do whatever you have to do, don't go any further, make it stop. It's not about hurting the other person, it's about protecting the self. And yeah, when people blend that, it gets pretty chaotic. um what was I going to get back to? Well, the fact that it's irrational is one. You got to stop talking like, oh, you're just thinking about this wrong. This isn't about thinking. This goes all the way down. This goes back to before we could speak with our parents or primary caregivers. We were wounded there, and this is our best effort to protect ourselves from that pain. And what, as children, we experience is life threatening, because if we don't have secure bonds with the people who care for us when we're young, we can die out there. And we know that deeply. It's encoded in our genes. And so there's that element to understand that ultimately it's almost a fear of death in a way, that I'm going to be out here alone and I'm not going to survive. So this is where another point is that we need to find a way to connect with that part of ourselves that is irrationally terrified. And we need to be able to get in there gently, lovingly, and say, I see you're afraid and I understand your fears and nobody wants to be there. But the reality is you're an adult, you have resources. You can marshal those resources to do the things you need to do to provide for your well-being and ostensibly for others as well. You are not a helpless child. You are not alone. You will not be thrown out with the hyenas, like, to fend for yourself. This is not what's going on. But it also is going to take a little bit of courage. It takes courage to resolve this, because we will always be in fear if we don't rewrite the program. We have to go in and overwrite what was etched so deeply so long ago and had so many structures built around it across all these years of living in the world, in different relationships, suffering different injuries, and maybe not having the kind of healthy connections that we really needed to help us correct our understanding organically. We have to go in and pull out the old programming and write in new programming. And it does take courage, because the way we do this is by engaging with that which terrifies us. This is exposure therapy. Exposure therapy solves so many things. Again, it's especially effective with anxiety, but exposure therapy, where this is concerned, is relational. We got hurt in relationships, we heal in relationships, right? So we have to go where we got hurt and open ourselves up to possibly getting hurt again, until ultimately we can find that healthy connection that allows us to have firsthand experiential knowledge deep in our being, where it can reach those underlying programs and say, hey, it's okay. We can turn off the alarms. You got this. You're good. Look, love can be safe. Relationships can be secure. You can be accepted for who you are, flaws and all. That's the other thing. You can't send a representative. You have to show up as you. You have to bring all the weird, awkward, embarrassing, possibly righteously shameful things about you and say, this is makeup. Oh my God. Can you accept it? And if somebody accepts us at that level, it is one of the most healing experiences. As far as I can see, anybody who's really made movement with this has done so through finding that security and acceptance, that the knowledge that somebody cares so deeply for our well-being, that whatever else is true, they will be there to bring us that love, that care, that support, that affection, that understanding, maybe a little bit of tough love when called for, but it'll be with our interests at heart. And through that, we can see that that is what healthy connection is about, and learn to overcome these fears. Will they flare up from time to time? Probably. But if we understand this and we approach it with a clear intent to work through it, we won't just come up against the impediment and be like, oh, the road's closed, got to turn back, better run the other way. You know, we'll say, look, there's an impediment and I've overcome impediments before. Now I got to figure out how to climb over this one and get beyond it too. And so yeah, thinking about how this all kind of ties together because I'm still trying to get a grasp of what is true and useful about understanding attachment theory, because I think we tend to treat it like another accessory for our identity. Like, oh, I'm avoidant, I'm anxious, I'm disorganized, and this person's that. You start playing that game, you start dehumanizing yourself and others doing that. You have an attachment style, other people have an attachment style. It's not permanent either, it can change. I think it changes a lot depending on the relationships and the circumstances. In some cases, I find I'm super secure with people. I don't think twice. I'm like very much at ease, very secure, very healthy relationships. Other relationships make me anxious. Like, wait, where are you going? What happened? Wait, hold on. Other relationships make me want to be like, slow down. Whoop, back up. I've I've sort of experienced all of these in some way, for better and for worse. The upside is I have compassion for all of these responses and experiences. Downside is I have to live through it, and so do the people around me. Mostly, I think I suffer the most. I try not to make it a big problem for other people, but it does. It does sometimes come out the wrong side and affect others as well. And I'm still learning how to effectively manage it when I feel overwhelmed and smothered, or I feel abandoned and insufficient, or um, even even sometimes I find within secure relationships, there's a sense of like, can I trust this? Right? Like, is this going to be sustainably good? Because that's an experience I've had that I can know people years and years and years and years, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, now, to be fair, in hindsight, as I've learned more about human behavior, I can look back at those situations and be like, yeah, there were signs. I didn't know any better, or I was in a place where I needed something, so I turned a blind eye to things, right? We do this, but it still leaves a little bit of insecurity, even around my most secure relationships. It's almost like getting the yips, like, oop, oop, like you can't explain why all of a sudden you're tripping on something you were doing just fine a minute ago. Um, So yeah, I don't think there's 100% resolution, but what I think you get is the opportunity to live 98% of the time feeling at ease and connected and secure with yourself and others and the relationships you share, such that if we can find the courage and do the work with each other and have compassion for ourselves and each other, that fear really underlies so much of this, and that the courage to engage in some sort of exposure therapy, and this doesn't mean go get married and start a family tomorrow. This means go deeper with your friendships. Take chances with a romantic interest that you might not otherwise. Give a little bit of yourself and see how it feels to be accepted or rejected in those moments. Learn ways of managing the feelings around rejection, that you don't turn it into, see, I'm awful, nobody's ever going to love me, I'm not worthy of love, everybody's got bad intentions, they're just here to use us or consume us, or be very careful. I'll always come back to the story we tell ourselves, because that's a big part of what gets us in trouble. Instead of saying this person has behaved this way and I feel this way about it, that's that's where we need to be working, to say this person has done this, I feel this way. I don't know enough to say anything else about it. Until I can really know where this person was coming from and what their intentions were, I can't even really say anymore. All I know is that they behaved this way. They said this thing, they did this thing, they showed up this way, they disappeared like that. That's all I can say. Keep it very simple. Keep it simple, stupid, right? The little KISS approach to doing this. The other thing is, it doesn't say anything about me as a person. It's just I feel this way about it. I feel hurt, rejected, sad, confused, overwhelmed. Um, it like the demands are more than I can meet, whatever it is. I'm having these emotional responses. I'm having this sense of things being out of alignment, and that's it. I'm having this feeling. It does not mean this person's terrible or I'm unworthy or love is an illusion. It just means this person did that and I feel this way. And the more we can stay clean with that, be simple with that, and be patient and give grace to others and ourselves to say, I don't know why they did that. I don't know what's going on. I know how I'm feeling, and I know I can tend to my own emotional needs right now. And if you're feeling overwhelmed and smothered, taking time for yourself and creating space and doing what's necessary, not going into some weird freak out cave dweller retreat from reality, but saying, I need some solitude. I need some time to be in the world as my own person. I need to be with people at different levels that it's not as much heavy lifting emotionally. Um, or to say, I feel rejected, I feel abandoned, I feel unlovable. Go get with people who will embrace you, even if it's just a lot of casual encounters. You don't always have someone to turn to. Go out and run errands and talk to strangers. Just talk to people. Get some sort of social connection, some sort of social feedback. Somebody looks at you, sees you, engages with you, and says, like, oh, that's so funny. Oh, that's interesting. I had that too. Oh, do you know about this thing? And they want to share something with you. These are all signs that you are acceptable. You are a socially viable human that other people want to be around. And in doing this, you have the opportunity to sort of reconnect where you feel that you're cut off and adrift in the universe. And getting busy doing those things that allow us to go out and build ourselves back up to where we feel solid and right in the relationship with ourselves. Even if the relationship with others goes wrong, we don't throw the relationship we have with ourselves under the bus. We go out and we double down on self-care. We say, you know what? I really was trying to get out to work out more often, or I really do need to catch up with my other social commitments. I really do want to have more time for this project I'm trying to develop. Turn and invest in that relationship with self. And if you find yourself ruminating, here's one I love. This goes way back for me. At one point, I looked at myself and I'm like, you could be crazy later, you know. I was like, yeah, say more. And I would get caught ruminating or really like in the downward spiral of emotion, and I just couldn't let go of it. I was like a pit bull with my teeth in it. And I feel like, look, you can put it down for a minute and still come back. You can drop that bone and come back and chew on it later. You don't have to do this now. And the like playful, semi-aggressive way of saying it I came up with was like, you can be crazy later, you know. I was like, oh, and maybe there's a better way of putting this, but it really worked for me to be like, all right, look, go out, walk around the house 3 times, breathe some air, and come back. And in 5 minutes, you still want to be like a crazy person? All the troubles will still be here waiting for you. You can come back to it then. But to give ourselves space and to say, look, if I'm stuck in this, I'm hurting myself. If I'm hurting myself, I'm I'm betraying the relationship I have with myself and the commitments I've made to the things I value in life. And I don't want to do that. I want to be able to at least know that I hit the circuit breaker, cut the power to the lines, let everything settle, and then I can come back and fire it up again if I need to. It's there. And of course, when we get relief from the thing that's running around in our heads, running us around, tormenting us, we don't exactly really want to go running back. We just get stuck in this feedback loop. And if you can break that loop, usually you'll come out somewhere else. It's not going to mean you're going to be like, oh, I feel much better now, everything's solved. But you'll be in a place where you can begin the work of solving the actual problems. So, anyway, these are some thoughts I have on the subject of how attachment theory is valid and useful, and how I continue to try to understand the finer points, and how I think it's unfortunate about the language that we say anxious and avoidant. It's all anxious, it's all fear-based, it all goes deep, and we should have compassion for ourselves and each other around this, because I stay out of the comment sections where this is going on, so I have to take people's word for it. But apparently there's a lot of eviscerating comments about avoidant people because, yeah, what they do is in many cases fundamentally an abusive behavior. You know, stonewalling, gaslighting, ghosting, these are not kind things. But there's a difference between doing that to hurt a person and doing it with the idea that it's the lesser of the evils, to say, like, it's better I do this than I stay in here and this person finds out they're stuck with the awful person I am, or I stay here and they consume me and there's nothing left of me and I have nothing to give to them or anyone else, or whatever the fear is. Doing this kind of janky thing seems the lesser of the evils. And so it's not malicious, it's knee jerk. It's like somebody gets startled and swings around and smacks you. It's not the same as they turn and face you and punch you in the face. You've been hit in the face either way, but there is a big difference between the two. And I think being able to see that is very helpful all around. Whether you're the one dishing it out, be like, okay, I'm not really a bad person, I really am just trying to protect people. Or you're the recipient, you're like, oh, that wasn't malicious, I wasn't like a fool being manipulated by someone with a serious personality disorder. I just ran into somebody who was like kind of flailing and didn't know what they were doing. Now, you got to question if that's the best place from which to have a relationship. But I talked about this a long time ago, where I was hearing people say you have to be healed to be in a relationship, and then other people saying you only can heal from within the relationship. I think both things are true. There's a certain amount of healing we should get done before we like pull anybody else into the jet engine of our crazy. But at a certain point, the healing we can do on our own only is going to get us so far, at which point we really do need to be in relationship with other people. Not necessarily committed romantic partnerships, not even romantic or sexual. Sometimes it's just having a good friend or building healthier relationships with family or building a community around us. These things can all help, but we need others at a point to help us do a certain kind of healing that allows us to be fully ourselves, and in giving into the fear and playing blame games and writing stories over facts that don't have anything to do with each other, likely don't. We're making it so that we can't really get under this, meet each other with compassion, and actually improve our conditions. So, all right, this is my ramble about how I'm still trying to figure out attachment styles. And one of the biggest things I can say is I think it's a lot about fear, and I think compassion and courage are required to get us forward. So, all right, I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to what comes up in the next round. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you. Bye-bye.